What is up, everybody? Happy Sunday. Welcome to the Sunday Open. I'm your host, Nick. How are we all doing? How's everyone's weekend? I hosted a baby shower at my house, and that was quite the adventure because you do a lot of prep work, you get organized, you help the wife out, and then you're handed the baby and say, get out of the house for 3 hours. And then actually are summoned back because everybody wants to see said baby. So that was a lot of fun on Saturday, having the most people I've ever had in my little house. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. What about everybody else? How did we all shake out this weekend? Anyone do anything fun? Good to see everybody. I see Leo is here, Jim is here, Uncle Bugatti's here. We're all moving up in the world. Look at this. There's a big group of folks here. Took a power nap before the casino open. I'm gonna make my lights a little brighter. It's funny. Sometimes you see how it looks in how the background, everything looks in the green room, and then you're like, it looks pretty good. And then you see it how it's going live out to YouTube, and then you're like, let me make this a tad bit brighter. Yeah. As you can see behind me, the Streamer Boy setup is nearing completion. Still a few small things that I'm going to tweak, but I can see the lights somewhat. I'm still kind of working on the old camera settings so that, it actually looks a little fun. I mean, I can actually change them throughout the stream, but yeah, if you've never hung out with me on a Sunday night, welcome. This is a prep show where disguised as a as an educational session. No, we basically do a market prep, a light market prep on the big four. We talk about what's on the docket as far as earnings releases, as well as the economic releases for this week. And this week is rather light on a lot of those economic releases. The main event is going to be Jackson Hole, the symposium itself, occurring this week for our lovely economists and led by our fearless, soon to, I guess, be old Fed chairman. Jerome Powell will be giving a lovely speech, as he does at the end of the Jackson Hole symposium on Friday at 9 a.m. Central Time. So in years past, this has been a very big event. Or at least Powell's speech during said event has been something of legend. If you recall, what was it Jackson Hole of 2022 that led us down to the lows, and Jerome did everything but say, like, nobody is taking me seriously or taking inflation seriously. And that was the most violent birthday I've ever had. My birthday is next week, but I think Jackson Hole actually fell on my birthday on the 26th. And I just remember I was actually wedding venue shopping, and was in Sedona, Arizona, looking at wedding venues, and the absolute bloodbath and violence from that morning was one to behold. So I doubt we're going to get any sort of fireworks like that, but we'll see. You had a hot PPI report last Thursday, and couple that with the right on target CPI. I mean, let's see what the Fed does. It seems like everyone's still pricing in a September cut, but we'll see if our lovely Fed members this week throughout their book tour leading up to Jackson Hole have anything further to say about that report and anything else that's going to be shaken out this week. So I'm very curious. This could be an interesting week. I'm kind of excited to trade this week. Let's go to the charts. We'll talk about it. There we go. I was like looking at the wrong screen to find where, not my charts, but where the outfeed was for this stream, so that I could actually make sure my charts were up there before I started just rambling. But how did we all do last week? I don't know about you guys. I mean, we made a new all-time high, confetti, balloons, whatever the heck it is you want. Where's my cursor? There we go. But we came up last week. If you remember last Sunday, we were talking about the one thing I was looking for, or hoping to see if we were going to make initiation and continue the never-ending march that is this market, rallying up 30% since Liberation Day without any sort of even small pullback, with the exception of this little fine structure that retraced all of July in a session and a half. But basically, what we were talking about last Sunday was for this to have legs, for us to get that continuation and make a new all-time high, you needed to see volume build basically above this little blue box that I had drawn going back to a couple weeks ago. And in the early parts of this week, the bottom edge of this box was providing a bit of resistance. So you weren't seeing any sort of initiation from buyers. All it took was a right on target CPI number to just launch us above it, and then basically never even give us an opportunity to kind of trade back into that range. We never did find anyone looking to initiate around those basically around these levels, kind of locking out any sort of sellers that were trying to continue to keep us inside of the old all-time high. So what did we do? We pierced up. I think XY and I were on for trade the close. We were trading around here around the 64.60s, and we never really left that area the remainder of the week. So the next 4 trading sessions, basically that was your new floor, and that new floor was pretty much the old all-time high sitting up here at 64.66s. And that's basically where we ended the week, was right at the old all-time high. So what does this tell me? How am I looking at it going into this week? Well, I guess with an open mind. I'm not ready to be quite say the rally is over, but I'm also not looking to short the all-time high like an absolute idiot. So as I'm kind of dissecting the early part of this week, which I guess I get to do with Leo tomorrow morning, we are going to be trading the open together. So not a ton of time for me to dissect how we open here tonight and then kind of jump into a fine trading day tomorrow morning with y'all. So I'm going to probably keep it light until the market makes a decision. And that decision is either, are we going to continue to kind of balance between the 64.60s and 6500s that we basically were in for the last 3+ sessions? Or do we fail at the July highs and start rotating probably back towards the August open down here towards 63.60s? I could see that very much happening this week if we cannot find more buyers interested. In fact, there was a couple situations where I was just not at my desk and I wanted to basically buy this 64.62 spot. And I seem to always miss that trade and then be trying not to chase it to the long side. I was looking to continue to initiate buys there. So the same thing's going to be true for me in the early part of this week, where I'm looking to potentially play the bottom side of this balance range and continuing to see, like, does this floor basically hold at the old all-time high? Can we continue to see? I mean, this was a decent volume build here in the latter half of the week. We pierced above that all-time high and we just kind of bounced. And there really wasn't a ton of initiation from sellers to want to push us back into that old range. So I'm kind of taking that seriously, where do we kind of get a range expansion of this balance? Like, do we kind of meander down here towards the 6400s even? Like, I could see that somewhere between kind of the 6420s. That big round number on SPX would make a lot of sense because that'd be right around what the spread is between ES and SPX this week. So I could see that kind of testing this little high volume node and this point of control from the last 2+ weeks is sitting right around there. So maybe we get a little bit of range expansion and kind of balance in that rough 100-point range in the early parts of this week. I could see that happening. I'm just not ready to say this rally is over just yet. Like I said, last Sunday I was talking about, before I'd really looked on a swing time frame to really sell this thing, I'd want to see sellers below this kind of 6,200 spot. I still weirdly have the point of control for the year back around that 6,000 and rough area on ES in the back of my mind. Like, something about that, not kind of retesting it after breaking so far above it, has been bugging me, and it is the point of control for the year. So maybe it'll take a little bit of some weakness end of August into September, like we usually would see, to potentially meander down there. But until we kind of break below this, basically the July lows, I mean, I'm not ready to really sell this market. We basically have just been trading in that 200-point range ever since. So for me, looking at this week, I'd really want to look for initiation from sellers below 6,400s. If not, I'm looking for dips to buy outside of my usual rotational scalps to the downside, those trades that I seem like I always find myself trying to do in the afternoon. But for the moment, it just seems like it's going to continue to grind higher. This was pretty telling last week. And even the hot PPI report did nothing. We just continued to kind of stay above the old all-time high. So yeah, it's a tougher read. But for the most part, with Jackson Hole on deck, we'll see. We'll see how this kind of shakes out. Options expiration week is behind us. Sometimes that can keep us. Sorry, I don't have water at my desk. I just realized. Sometimes that keeps us in this type of structure too, where there's just all of that options positioning for the month, and it can just kind of keep us balanced as well. So now that that is behind us and we have Jackson Hole on deck, I mean, maybe we get that range expansion and maybe we retest some of these levels, or maybe we're just off to the races to the upside and continuing to make more all-time highs. I guess what I'm saying is I don't have I'm trying not to have any sort of bias for this week. I really do think it can go absolutely either way. We may not get any significant move until the latter half of the week with things like Jackson Hole and Powell's speech. I mean, anything we do this week, the entire structure could be destroyed by said speech at 9 a.m. on Friday. So it could be one of those weeks where we just balance on a little wider of a range than we did last week. And then, we get a real move post Powell. I have absolutely no idea. Biases, moon, and more air horn blowing. I could see it. I mean, it's hard to look at this. Look at the structure that we've been in since like early May. And I'm getting to the point where it's hard for me to not be like, all right, when's like the 3 to 5% correction coming, because we've just continued to slowly march higher and higher and higher. And yeah, I'm ready for some real speed of this in the tape to come back, some real volume and actual, some much stronger movement, potentially some volatility like we were seeing towards the end of April or even most of March. So I don't know. I'm tired of this type of price action. Bounce, and a big move higher, and then more bounce, move higher. Like, I just loved these two sessions from Thursday and Friday, the last week of July. And the reason is you get some very tradable bidirectional moves throughout that type of day. So that's my bread and butter. That's where I tend to do very well. I mean, I did okay last week. I was green, but not my favorite type of price action to take. We are about 90 seconds to the Globex Open. So it was a pretty quiet weekend. What are everyone's thoughts on this open and for the week, more or less? Are we going to gap up, gap down, right around settlement? I don't really have a good edge so far. I think, quiet, we're right around the old all-time high. Maybe, I'm going to closest to the pin, say somewhere around the 6460s, but we'll see. It's always hard for me on a quiet week to have quiet weekend, to have any sort of edge or bias of which direction we may open in. But it's always fun to play this game with everybody that's hanging out with us, all 200 plus of you. I really, really appreciate you spending your Sunday afternoon with me, your Sunday evening, some of you your Monday morning, because I do remember we had a viewer or a couple of viewers in the Asia Pacific time zone. So that was kind of cool to see too. I think we had somebody that was tuning in from New Zealand a few weeks back. Guess down, gap down. Honestly, I have no clue at this point. We ranged all afternoon Friday. We're going down at the open. Well, we'll find out here in about 10 seconds. Settlement was 64.70s. We kind of meandered a little lower in the extended hours session. So we'll see how we open. Yes, no gap, just a little bit move higher, coming into settlement around the 64.70s to kick us off here. NQ actually basically did the same exact move, but your week open on NQ going to be 23,007. What is that? 795 roughly. Can't exactly tell, but right around there. And if you were paying attention to the week open last week, I mean, you saw it on a good day like Friday, especially on NQ, how supportive that can potentially be. There was, where was it? I mean, it was the 760s, I want to say, right? Yeah. I think it was like maybe it was like 766 or something, somewhere in that realm last week. And that basically was the low of part of Friday. But once we got back above it, I think on Thursday we kind of wicked below it, and then even Friday again, it just continued to provide a number of tradable scalps off it. So highly recommend, if you're not paying attention to that lovely piece of MGI, it's something you should at least have on one of your long time frame charts, just to maybe gauge trend for the week from the overall perspective. It just seems to provide a couple trading opportunities each week if you're paying attention and you're patient. So yeah, highly recommend. The one on ES, the week open on ES, I just realized I didn't actually change that chart. Week open 64, 66-ish. Let me get the exact number. 64, 67. Yeah, 64, 67 and a quarter. So there's your week opens for ES and NQ. But yeah, that's the idea on ES. Like I said, for me, until we kind of break below the August open, which is basically down here at 63 60s, which would kind of equate to all of these value areas also stacking up here. So it's just hard for me to want to get too bearish. Last week was pretty telling, and it didn't take, we rallied hard on that CPI number and then didn't care to the big miss that was the PPI number. So I don't know. I'm just a trader, man. I just press buttons. I'm not every time I try to get too in the weeds of what's going on in macro realm, I get myself in trouble. So trade what's in front of you. On NQ, a very similar structure to ES. Actually didn't have as much of an outside move. There was that one day where I think maybe it was Tuesday post CPI where XY and I were on for trade the close, and we felt like ES was just like yanking NQ up. It just was not quite ready to play ball, and ES was just absolutely off to the races higher. So kind of an interesting, not really a balanced week, but you kind of had two distributions, and we kind of just kept making like lower highs all last week before settling around that 23,800 spot on NQ, which, like I said, just a little bit above the week open. Or no, sorry, the week open was 6, whatever it was. I don't know. I've now forgot what that number was, but basically is somewhere around, it was 760s. Yeah. Okay. So that's basically where we settled for the week. So as I'm looking at this, we had a ton of volume kind of trade around that 2,400 evens spot down to kind of the 23,900s. Like you have this big notch above the old all-time high that we were kind of trading and meandering around. I just didn't see, outside of that initial kind of blow off into whatever it was, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday up here. I guess it was in the overnight into Wednesday morning. We were trading upside in the upper 24,000s. And I actually did catch a decent short off here, off like the 60s, the 24,060, and wrote it down to 940s, basically the point of control for the week. That was actually my best trade of the week. But ever since then, ever since we kind of broke inside of 24,000 again, there has not been a ton of interest in buying prices above it. We continue to kind of come up, kind of ping in the 960s, 970s, 980s, and then just a reoffer comes in. So I also take that a little seriously. Like I said, we did kind of close around that old all-time high spot. So I'm cautiously watching for some aspect of a value rotation where maybe we kind of trade the other side of some of this volume for the last, 3+ weeks. Like we had that kind of slow, choppy, meander, grind up action like this for a few weeks. And then we retraced all of it in 2 sessions. And then we were basically back a week later. So do we now get another reoffer, potential push back down here towards 22,800s? I mean, it's very possible at some point. But for me, I'm really kind of honestly going to use part of, or I would expect at the very least, the bottom edge of this little balance range box that's been drawn by the OFL tools, kind of sitting around here, the 23,600s, which basically was last week's lows. I kind of am gauging that somewhere between those 6s and 7s, that old value area high from the old all-time high, like that potentially as a spot that I could very much continue to see buyers stepping in. If you lose that, I would expect us to come down here towards the 23,200s. But for some reason, I'm just looking at this and kind of thinking something about balance this week. I mean, for all we know, I could wake up tomorrow and we're trading at another new all-time high. But and then it gives me the last time I was on for the open here on NT Live, where we just had an outside move from when I did this show. We just kind of we had a gap down, we marched up, and then by the time I got to the desk, it was basically turning into structure that was looking like a lockout trend day higher, which is just my worst nightmare. So we'll see if we get something similar to that, and we're already trading up near the 24,000s and just giving me every reason to not get long for some insane idea in my head. But for the most part, I mean, we were just kind of tightly range bound at times last week. So I'm same thing, just like I was saying in ES. I don't have a specific edge or direction in mind. I'm just kind of watching specific areas. So you have last week's value area high up here in that kind of 960 spot. You have the point of control just below that 940s that I covered my short at. But same thing, there was a bit of resistance the last 2 sessions. So I'm cautiously watching that, and we'll see how much, like where the volume really comes in. If we were to test any of this structure a touch lower. Oh, and I'm sorry, I just saw somebody was asking, MGI means market generated information. So basically that would be all of these little letters and words that are kind of on my chart here. So MGI would basically be like, oh, okay, last week's value area high, the previous month's value area high. So MGI and volume around those MGI levels for where when we are trading at those levels in the future is just how I then gauge what is happening in the auction, like who is stepping up, buyers or sellers. Have you ever seen us trade on Trade the Close, or obviously sometimes in the open? We use a lot of different tools that are kind of eyeballing the order flow. And so for me, it's always, okay, we came into last week's value area low and I saw a ton of buyers stepping in and lifting the offer there. So maybe it's a good indication that I feel I have found a support level that I could potentially lean on and get long with because of what I just witnessed on time and sales or whatever it is. So that is kind of how I use MGI. I don't just blindly, look at this as support and resistance because we're trading above it and then we come below, we start to test it to the downside. Like there's a method to kind of gauge for a reaction at pieces of MGI. So that's kind of how I try to use some of these levels. So MGI, market generated information. These are 1 hour candles and weekly volume profiles. That's how I tend to use my prep charts and just gauge the previous week's volume in relation to the previous months or whatever. You could also throw on like a visible range volume profile over here if you wanted to kind of see a more clear picture of, let's say, the last month's structure. But for me, I don't feel the need to do that because I already have the value area high, the value area low here, and then the previous week structure. But you could adjust it from there. I've just always kind of used a 1 hour for my longer time frame, like prep charts, just because it's short enough that it kind of helps me intraday to just gauge longer time frame trend and things like that, and then identify those MGI spots. So anyway, like I said, for us to get legs higher, you'd really want to find buyers starting to initiate above 23,960s. If not, I very much could see us potentially testing the August open here around 23,300s. As always, in the event of a more outside week, the big spot to watch is still where that Armageddon Thursday and Friday type buyers stepping in, which was the value area low for July. And it was a level we were talking about for all of these weeks. Like when we were just doing this slow build up, all of the end of June and July, it was just like there was a big old notch of volume sitting. And when I've seen this, all of this volume, the big point of control, there was a big kind of pivot level around that 800 spot. So the same thing is true. In the event we get another violent outside week to the downside, that's like the first place I might be watching and trying to actually knife catch down there. In the event they left the building, it gets a little slippery down towards kind of the 22,200s to 300s. So that would be your more outside move to the downside. Otherwise, new all-time highs. We'll hit, get the confetti canyons ready. Go America, more all-time highs. Someone was supposed to, in the chat last week, tell me if we broke the record from last summer of the most all-time highs. Someone was supposed to do that. I don't know if that person's here, but someone said they were going to figure that out. So if that person is here, please do share if there were more all-time highs this summer or previous summer. I'd actually love to know that. So, anyway, so far, guys, we are kind of off to the races to the upside. We didn't have a gap down. We opened right around kind of the extended hours closing price and just immediately found buyers. So once again, we'll see what the structure and everything looks like from the overnight as Asia opens here in the next hour plus, or starts to open rather. And I always laugh sometimes when I wake up and you get a crazy move off of the Sunday open. So we'll see how things shake out when I get to trade the open tomorrow. Should be a lot of fun. Actually doing that twice this week. I will also be trading with Chris on Thursday. So that should be a lot of fun too. Chris and I have gotten to hang out, but we've never traded together. Just those few minutes in between passing of sessions here on NT Live. So that'll be cool. But yeah, NQ doing something very similar. Currently trading around the 840s level. So far off to the races. Let's talk about Crude, because Crude did the exact worst possible thing based on what I was hoping or wanting to try to do last week, which was play what was the old bottom of balance here, basically around, excuse me, 63s. If you remember last Sunday, I was talking about potentially looking for, not necessarily a swing trade long, but a trade with micros that I could potentially play up towards 67 by trying to get long here around where we opened last Sunday, which was you had that violent wick testing kind of the 62, 61s, and then we were kind of settling here around the 62 evens, whatever it was Sunday night when we were opening. We were somewhere around 62 to 63. When we were doing the show. And I was like, I kind of like the way that weekend we kind of came back inside of the value area from the previous week structure. And I'm like, maybe there's a chance that I could try to build into a position with micros. But I was also cautiously saying, like, if we start to lose or we don't find really buyers initiating above the 63 spot, then there's a high probability we probably are going to go test this low down here towards like the 61s. And you got that exact kind of attempt, and we didn't find anybody really interested in transacting above the 63s. So we made a new low and now settled at what is kind of this large balance area. And so far, it just looks like Crude is going to continue to trade in between that kind of 62s to 67s that we've basically been in for 6+ weeks. So that trade is not dead. I just don't want to, in theory, initiate anywhere inside of probably 62s. I'd probably look to be above probably the July low, somewhere around here, before I'd be like, all right, let me try that that value rotation, that balance range move to the other side with some micros, and maybe let's see if it's going to play out over the course of this week. I'm a little cautious with this, just knowing the last 3 weeks of structure have just been basically us continuing to move to the downside. But this has always been a decent home for crude, at least as a bottom edge of the range, somewhere down here towards the 60s. So depending on your risk tolerance, there probably is a trade here. I don't know if I'm going to take it. I think equities potentially are going to provide some decent trading opportunities this week. But the same thing we talked about last Sunday, it's still somewhat valid. I mean, you got that move lower, and now we are kind of back inside of even the low from that violence heading back towards the end of June. So there may be here that trade. I may take it on a day time frame if something presents itself, but there still is that logic to play the other side of this lovely balance area and maybe get that full trip up towards 67s, maybe 67.50s, if you were to, in theory, try to trade it or swing it for the entire week. Maybe this is the week that we kind of test the other side. That's the only way I'd be looking at this. I've said many times on the show, I cannot short crude. There's something wrong with me. I will happily short any indice at all times. It doesn't even take it doesn't take a lot of MGI or order flow information for me to be like, yeah, I'll take a short here. But for some reason, I just can't press the red button on crude. So naturally, I'm just looking for longs. So maybe there's something with my bias that I can fix there for this instrument. But for some reason, I just never look for shorts in crude. So last week, naturally, I found a buying opportunity that would have eventually, you would have been able to get out for a small profit there. I got chopped up to death and then probably stopped out. But it's the same exact setup now that I guess once again, I'm gutting for punishment, looking for longs in this. But I kind of like it. Something about shorting crude just has never sat well with me. So in the event that we get any sort of build above, I'm going to call this the point of control from last week, more or less down here at 62.20s. If we get above that, I might take a stab with some MCL to try to capture the wider move up towards 65s and see what happens there. Maybe hold some runners for 67, but I'm saying that like I'm going to do it. I don't know. I might do it. But then it's like, am I tying up that much margin? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see how the week shakes out. Hey, Phoenix. Cooper Pie. You guys are always usually hanging out. Good to see everybody. I don't know. What is everyone else's thought here? Am I just long biased for crude? Like, am I the only one seeing this? I guess. Am I a crazy person for kind of wanting to get this balance rotation to the other side? Like, am I crazy? Yeah, Texan always looking for higher crude. My cowboy hat's over there. I was like, you know what? I should have, for this exact trading pitch that is the crude long here that I'm trying to, manifest. I should have probably had the cowboy hat ready to go and throw that on. But I am wearing my Texas Surf and Turf hat, so I guess that also suffices in some capacity. Anyway, I feel like I've just rambled long enough on crude. I'm also like dragging this out because gold is still doing gold things, and we just had a D-shaped profile or a double distribution D-shape, whatever you want to call this misery after the tariff blow off top that was the gold move. And then if you remember last Sunday, we talked about, we were sitting right at the top of the old range. Like, I literally think we opened and then we just continued to kind of slowly move lower. I don't remember. I think we were trading somewhere around like the 34.45s or something when we started the show. Maybe it was a little higher. But we had talked like in the event that, you could probably take the stab at taking longs down here around the 40s. But if we lost that, the logical place would be back to what is now gold's home, which is basically just trade between 34.40s and 33.30s for eternity. Because it doesn't matter what's going on geopolitically with tariffs. It just seems like that's the new home, and crude or gold is the new crude, which is just forever being range bound. And you know what's funny? After almost a year of kind of just being trend to the upside, going back to maybe not a year, maybe like 9 months of trend, of just that breakout above what was 2400s. Obviously, rollover and things, grain of salt with the exact number, but what was that breakout move higher from last August? And then eventually the retests that I fumbled in November of last year around those areas. But we just had been trending higher, and now we just seem to be settling in this new home that is 100-point range for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months, however long it's been. And you would think with equities continuing to move just violently to the upside, maybe we'd catch. Eventually, we were going to catch some weakness in gold, retest 3,000 at some point. It just continues to prove me wrong and now be forever in balance. So, just like we were saying last week, since we failed to hold 3440s, which was basically July's value area high. No surprise. The value area is for July is this exact range. Slightly tighter than that. But now, since we failed there, the logical place would be that we probably find buyers somewhere between the 3360s and the August open that is the 3340s. So that's what I'd just be doing, is you're playing the edges until you're proved wrong. Eventually, this is going to break out of this 100-point range, and you have situations like this where we did on the tariff news and we violently marched another 100 points higher before cooling off and settling back into value. So not a insane amount of edge in this outside of just play the edges. All I'd be looking for, and unless there is some sort of headline news that is going to drive this out of this range, which there has been at times, but it just seems like it just eventually meanders right back into this range. And I need more data once again, or more days loaded without somehow breaking my charts live on the stream, which would never be a good thing. But we can't even see how far this range is going back at this point. But the logic would be, until proven otherwise, I'd be playing the July value area. And you can see just each week's structure. That trade has paid several times. Even just kind of playing the are we above or below with volume 3440s or 3340s, and just kind of playing the inside of that. Not being the first person to initiate off of it, but playing the trend once we've kind of broken inside or above it once again. Ben bought the dip in gold on Thursday. It's not the worst spot to start potentially nibbling, at least looking at the last 3 weeks of structure. Like, your floor is kind of that 3360s, which is July's value area low. Not the initiating down here, not the worst idea, but we'll see. Anyone that's watched this with me over the last few weeks, months since we've been doing it, I don't have a good thing to say about gold. I feel like I haven't. I've just been like cursing its name because this is it just cannot make a decision. And I'm going to continue to rant and ramble about it, I guess, for the foreseeable future until something changes. So yeah, I'm tired of talking about it. The one thing I do want to talk about was last Sunday, we did talk about this. We talked about the YM. I did this very briefly, but while ES and NQ were kind of already marching or sitting on a higher part of this range in March, that is the move to the all-time highs, we had talked about YM for some reason just seemed to be lagging a little bit on that structure, and that if we did get that move, YM could play catch up. So definitely looks like a more trendy move in the YM last week once we kind of broke out of this structure here. In fact, YM went up, made a new all-time high. So it did, in fact, catch up to equities and actually get that more outside move as you compare it to NQ, which kind of peaked above and then just kind of meandered back down, going back to the last few weeks. Like, YM was kind of sitting back into this old balance, like was sitting in actually below the balance from July a little bit. And that's why I was kind of saying, like, maybe there's a catch-up trade in the old YM at some point. And I guess we got it last week in a couple sessions. So that was interesting. Just figured I would mention that because that was kind of what I was looking for. And now, all bets are off because we really did settle right back into all of this balance and chop at the all-time high from July. So sitting around 45,000s, I I have no edge. We'll see if this holds. If not, we probably fall back down here towards the 44,300s, 200s, or the 500s rather. That's where all this volume was too. But somewhere around there, I could see us just kind of rotating to the other side of this multi-week balance from early in July. But we got that catch-up trade. That was nice to actually see. Sometimes it's like even something you don't trade, but you talk about, you're kind of doing just validating in some ways, like the effort that you're putting in to find things, identify ideas for potential trades, and in a market that I don't usually look at very often and definitely don't trade in. But it's always nice to see things that just from a technical perspective kind of play out like that. At least validate the effort, education, things you're doing as a trader. It's always good to see things like that eventually play out. And YM sometimes does this. There was another situation where YM was kind of lagging the rest of the indices. And we had talked about it on the show. And then like 2 weeks like later, not the week right after, but eventually it did kind of make that catch up move. Just from a structure perspective to catch back up into kind of the structure that ES and NQ were trading. So it's good to eventually see things like that play out, even if I don't ever want to trade the YM, but sometimes just seeing those things eventually play out is cool. Kind of validating the effort that you put into understanding trading at times. So anyway, and as we always say, I'm going to jump to earnings and the economic calendar here in a second. But if there are questions, if there's things you guys want me to talk about, focus on anything about me, my trading, or anything we've gone over in tonight's show, feel free at any time to throw it into the chat. I always do reserve time towards the end of the show to talk about it or answer those questions for you guys. So if there are any, feel free to throw them into the chat. I will happily catch up if I miss it at the end of the show. But we're going to go to earnings first. So I know it's not NVIDIA earnings week. That is, in fact, next week. They will be reporting on the 27th, which will be the main event of next week and the jokes that I will probably talk about next Sunday. But there are some notable names this week that are not necessarily bellwethers, but and not necessarily are going to move the markets, but could overall affect outlook on a few things. And these would be some of our largest retail names, with Home Depot, Target, and Walmart reporting. So Home Depot always giving a good pulse check on the consumer renovations, the housing market always is a good judge there. Target and Walmart always do give you that good pulse of the, I would say, the average consumer, not the high-end consumer necessarily, not the low-end consumer, but pretty much the average everyday American between Target and Walmart. You're gonna cover just about every basis for the majority of population with how they report, things they talk about. So I'm always interested to hear their outlook on spending, on guidance, especially going forward. So Home Depot, Target, Walmart, 3 big bellwethers in the retail space. Always good to pay attention and at least understand how they're doing, what they have to say. I think we have housing starts this week as well. We'll get to that, I guess, during the economic releases. But Toll Brothers, after the close on Tuesday, one of the biggest home builders in the country. Always good to be paying attention to their outlook, since housing just always seems to be a big focus when we're talking about potentially cutting rates and everything else. So we'll see. I'm still waiting for the housing market here in North Texas to cool off. I know it has outside in the burbs. I'm not in the burbs. I'm more in the heart of Dallas. So it's always interesting to kind of see, is our housing market going to cool a little bit? I know it's starting to in parts of the country, but curious what Toll Brothers has to say as well. Palo Alto from my old world, they are reporting tomorrow after the close. And then the other one, at least that I'm paying attention to, I guess Zoom is on Thursday, but Workday is another big SaaS name. So curious to see business applications, how companies are spending, are they growing, what their AI story may articulate or how it's articulated at this point into their products as well. So always interesting to hear, names like them, names like Salesforce, a few of the other big software as a service business application space, because it's like the other side of like the Google, the Azure, the AWS story. It's kind of that other Like you have the infrastructure side and then you have everything else that companies use. So I'm always paying attention to those type of names as well. But outside of that, oh, we do have Baidu as well. Am I missing any others? No, those were the major ones. So not a quiet earnings week, but not the main event that NVIDIA earnings will be next week, but a decent one. There's some big names. TJ Maxx too. TJX, whatever. That's the symbol. All right, we'll jump to the economic calendar. So, as I said, it is a rather light week as far as economic releases. The main event is still going to be on Friday with Jerome Powell giving his Jackson Hole Symposium speech. As I've said, in years past, it has been quite a violent day based on that speech. I mean, even going back to 2022, that was the basically the "you're not taking me seriously" speech. It was short and very effective to move in the markets. I don't know what it's going to look like this year with Powell all but being, I guess, a lame duck Fed chairman. If that's the framing of the terminology we should be using for someone who has done everything but just step down at this point, given all of the pressure from the current administration that basically says they want him gone. So we'll see. We'll see what this speech really is. Am I a Cowboys fan? Absolutely not. There's nothing better than living in Dallas and not being a Cowboys fan. I actually have no NFL allegiance. I grew up in Southern California before there were any teams, and after the original teams had left LA. So for me, there was no NFL presence in Southern California. You had the Chargers in San Diego, but I didn't live in San Diego. I grew up in Orange County, so there's no team. I really just have the Angels. That's the only team I care about, and they are terrible. So Monday, 3 and 6 month bill auction. Outside of that, nothing. Tuesday, housing starts, building permits. Could be interesting. Let's see. I'm continuing to kind of start watching the housing market a little more for a variety of reasons. But curious to see how this starts looking, especially if we continue to see additional rate cuts this year. Let's see how interest rates on housing gets affected, and thus some of these levels as well. On Wednesday, the big event outside of the 20-year bond auction at 12 o'clock Central Time is going to be the FOMC minutes from the previous FOMC a couple weeks ago, where we held firms steady. So curious to see how many more. I mean, I think we knew there were 2 dissenters. I mean, I think we at this point know who those dissenters were, but I'm curious to see the ones that were still very much firm on holding policy. Like what, just some of the verbiage that was used. I kind of want to understand things a little further. So I actually am curious to see what the statement really looks like. I don't think we're going to get much different, but if you remember FOMC, Powell was a little, I said it, I think Tracy even like reaffirmed kind of what I was, because XY and I were trading the close during the press conference, and I was weirdly listening to it and just kind of sensing like the tone from Powell was just a little more tense. It was a little more, I don't want to use the word aggressive because that's probably not the right word to describe it, but it just was not as lackadaisical, like everything's fine. Like he was a little more hawkish. That's not the word I would want to use either, but I'm just kind of curious what these minutes really look like. And then we'll have the main event, obviously on Friday. But Jackson Hole basically is going on this week, and there's several, basically it's like a mini conference at this point. But, so there'll be random things. I mean, who knows what random sound bites and statements and things will kind of get flooded in, hitting the airwaves throughout the week. But it could be interesting. What was it? Thursday. We will have initial jobless claims, Philly Fed, and existing home sales, and PMI even. So actually, Thursday's got a decent amount between pre-market and then shortly thereafter the bell with the flash PMI, as well as existing home sales at 9 a.m. Central Time. So a couple gotchas there in the pre-market. So just be aware of that. Oh, and then we will have a 30-year auction. Wonderful. At noon. But as I said, the big event right here, Daddy Powell, 9 a.m. Friday. Be ready. That should be absolutely a lot of fun. If it's anything like years past, it will be a very tradable event if you're into that sort of thing. But no, expect the similar volatility that you would see during a normal PAL statement release and presser. That's usually how I've always treated it. It's just like anything can happen. The market could react a variety of ways to any verbiage he uses at any time. So that's how I'd be thinking of it. But outside of that, pretty light week, especially in the early parts. Main event Friday. Hopefully plenty of decent trades. Maybe you won't even need to trade on Friday because of you've had a good week and there's nothing to worry about and you're not even going to risk losing $1 on what Daddy Powell is going to say on Friday. And what is his likely to be his last Jackson Hole Symposium speech. So that should be a lot of fun. What is one stock that you were eyeing with potential growth in mind this week? I don't day trade stocks. I just hold things long-term portfolio and a single stock portfolio, but I don't trade them. I just buy names I like and I hold them hopefully for as long as humanly possible. So, I grew up in the beach cities of Orange County. So, on the basically west of the 405 in Orange County. Thoughts on copper? I don't have a copper chart built. I should probably get one. I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to have a couple of them random miscellaneous charts without breaking all of this stuff as I'm trying to do it. I load a lot of days and data and volume data into this for a variety of these long time charts. And I try not to overwhelm my computer, Ninja, everything just to make this, because like it's one thing when I'm looking at it, it's another thing when I'm trying to present this live in real time to y'all. So sometimes I try not to overload my charts. But yeah, I think I can build a copper chart for next week. We can start to look at one of the other metals. Maybe the metals would be a good idea because the ag products don't open. So it's kind of irrelevant for me to really look at them for the Sunday open. There was another question. Yeah, a lot of acceptance in range. I don't think the Texas housing market doesn't really go with oil prices anymore. That's probably more out in West Texas, out in Midland and Odessa, and some of the cities out there where you're actually in the patch and things. It does not. It's not really. I mean, Austin became like super tech, and yeah, it doesn't really affect the markets here, especially not in the major cities of Dallas and Austin, Houston. Houston probably a little more, but not in the way you think. There's so much industry in Houston. It has nothing to do, not necessarily has to do with oil as a whole. It's more natural. It's more energy products as a whole. So that's it. If there are any other questions, oh, there is one. What made you move to Texas? So when I was working 9 to 5 world, they actually offered me a promotion if I wanted to move to Texas. So I initially had lived here about 2 years out of college. I got offered a job that was either go to Seattle or go to Dallas. So I said, I'm going to Dallas. And then ended up getting a new opportunity back in Southern California, did that for a couple of years. So live by the beach, back home where I'm from. And then I was working for that same company and they said, hey, we're opening up a Dallas hub. If you want to move to Dallas, it's a great way to fast track a promotion. So I said, absolutely. Cause I had lived here and moved back and I have been here ever since. So in total, I've been in Dallas I've been in Dallas for over a decade. So it's been fun. I like it here. Not for everybody, not everybody's cup of tea, Texas as a whole, but you get some varieties. And I feel like every major metropolitan city, Texas is probably a little different, but more often than not, every major city in each state, like that's a larger population boom, they're all going to have a similar feel in some capacity. So Dallas is just like every other major state, except things are a little more spread out. You have to have a car here. And it's hot. Yes, this is very true. It is very hot between the months of June, July, August, and September. In fact, it's still hot here when the State Fair of Texas is going on and it's college football season and you're starting to put Halloween decorations out and it's still hot. And then something happens on like Halloween night on the 31st, where suddenly like the night temperature goes from like being 60 degrees to suddenly it'll hit like 40 out of nowhere. And it's like a really weird transition of seasons here in Dallas. But anyway, if there are no more questions, I will let you all get out of here a few minutes early. And we can do a quick recap of ES. So I'll let everybody, anyone who wants to ask another question, go for it. If not, we're going to talk about a quick recap in my rough plan for ES. So as I said, for me to really want to short this too far, I would expect us to have to lose 6460s with some force. And then we still have this big glaring not round number, but all of this volume that is traded kind of enacted as support and resistance at times between kind of the 6420s and the 6440s. So you got to get through all of that, which also is last week's value area low. And we never even got a chance to really come back and test the top edge of this old blue box from hell, I guess, this point that I'm going to call it. But for the most part, a majority of last week's volume was us trading basically in a 40-point range. So until we break out of this range, not really a great edge outside of look to play the upside of potentially sellers stepping in up here towards 6500s. Or like I said, last week, there was a couple times where I was just not at my desk, but I wanted to buy like 62s in ES for at least that trip back up to the kind of the 80s, 82s spot, which I guess actually was basically the point of control of the week, as well as this little small balance range too. So for me, they got too bearish. If we were to get some outside move, whether it be from Jackson Hole Powell or something else that's going on this week, I would expect at least on the first touch that this area down here between 6415s, this point of control down here, like I would expect that to be defended at least on the first touch. So outside week, if we were to break this to the downside, that's the first place I'm probably expecting to find buyers and potentially look to get long 6400s in the SPX, as well as this kind of little lovely structure here on ES. You lose that, probably coming down here to test the August open at 6360s. So that's kind of my plan. As I said, I'm not getting too bearish unless we lose a 6300s on the old S&P. Until then, I'm kind of just playing this range. I would expect possibly maybe we get a little heat check and come down here, but if not, if we continue to not be able to find anybody interested in selling this below 6460s, everyone hit the confetti button, the confetti grenades or cannons, whatever they're called, and air horns and new all-time high, streamers, fireworks, go America. That's kind of the volume of this tape right now, is just continue to make a new all-time high and move higher. So that's why I'd be looking at this. That's the prep. I appreciate everybody hanging out with me. If you have not already, please do smash the thumbs up button. It helps me out. It helps other people hang out with us here on Sunday nights. Find the stream. And if you didn't know, we are on a quest for 150,000 subscribers on this YouTube channel. So once we do it, the NinjaTrader team is going to do something really cool, allegedly, for all of us. So I would highly recommend, if you are not subscribed, to please do hit that button as well as a thumbs up button before everyone gets out of here tonight. What is on the docket for this week with me and trading tomorrow morning? I will be back with Big Cat himself, Leo the Tiger, to trade the open. And then I will be doing double duty, followed by, I guess we will be trading the open, and then you will have our lovely trading buddy Stowe to trade the midday session before I am back in the afternoon to trade the close. So that should be a lot of fun. Should be an eventful Monday, doing 3 shows in 24 hours another week, or really 3 shows in 18 hours. So hopefully my voice will rest and I won't have the same situation that I had that last time I was trading Monday morning with y'all. And then I suddenly couldn't speak. Like nothing was coming out of me without me having to clear my throat. So hopefully we don't have that. But As always, guys, I very much thank you all for hanging out with me here on your Sunday evening, Sunday afternoon for some of you, Monday morning for a couple of people. I think we had our buddy from Australia here today, so that was cool. Everyone have a good night. If you're trading this, trade safe. So far, this has just been bid to the upside, so go with volume, go with momentum. As always, trade safe, trade smart. Everyone have a very safe and fun rest of your Sunday evening. And I will be back and see you all tomorrow morning, bright and early, to trade the open. Cheers, guys.